All right, so right back into it, we're going to be talking about documents, 2.5D mode, edit mode, Dynamesh, Zremesh, divide, and subtools. So we have this kind of cursed looking object, not going to lie. And I want to talk about first a common problem that you're going to run into. And that is that when we're sculpting, we're in 3D mode. Look, I clicked up on the edit button up here in the top left. Not to be confused with the edit menu, but it's asking me, do I want to switch back to 2.5D mode? And I'm going to show you what that looks like, because this is going to happen to you. You're going to be very confused as to what's going on. So now I'm in 2.5D mode right here. See that? And I'm just dragging out that tool. So note on your tools panel over here, you're dragging out this selected tool. And we don't want that. In order to fix that, what you're going to want to do is go to Document, New Document. It's going to be like, hey, watch out, you're going to reset your document. That's exactly what we want. And then we're going to draw out another guy. I'm going to hold Shift to lock them into position. There we go. Let's get them on the going vertically right there. Let's go back into Edit mode. Boom. There we go. So now we're able to sculpt again. So that's how you fix that up real quick. So again, that's new document, drag one out, and then edit mode. Edit mode is also under the hotkey T, if you like hotkeys for that. But yeah, so going further along this stuff, back into this guy, note that we have, I did that insert multi-mesh tool, that IMM brush primitives, IMM primitives. And what that has allowed me to do is add on a lot of geo. But notice that there's this seam between them, right? Now, sometimes we might want that. Say you have an armor plating on top of something, or like a button on top of something. You want to see that division between the meshes. But if we want this to be one continuous mesh, we need to re-sample this geometry. And what we're going to use to do that is Dynamesh. So let me turn on the polyframe so we can see this at work. You can see currently it's multicolored. This means that they're different poly groups. And you can see that that close holes / trim brush really likes to make a new poly group. And you can select these poly groups, by the way, by just pressing Control Shift. And then it hides everything else, so that's nice use. But we're going to Dynamesh this. And let's crank this resolution down, because we want it to be fairly low res. We don't want a bunch of subdivisions in here, you see that? So I'm going to do a resolution of 64, and let's do Dynamesh. Boom. There we go. So you see that? See how it redid that geometry? And then if we look at that seam that we had before, it's no longer a seam. It's one continuous piece of geometry. So Dynamesh is fantastic at combining different shapes into one. Fantastic for that. Now, what it's also good at is giving us an even amount of geometry on the object, right? Now, this isn't good topology, right? It's just nice for sculpting. So what we can do is, let's say we wanted to sculpt on those horns that we had from before. I'm going to pull out that geometry. Now, look at the polyframe. You can see how stretched out these get. And that's not going to be good for sculpting at all. Say I go into my clay buildup. See how I can't do anything with that. Like it's, if I wanted to add like ribs across it, you know, like I wouldn't be able to do that. So what Dynamesh is going to do for us is resample this geometry and give us a nice sculptable surface. So I can either click this button off and click it on again to Dynamesh it, and you can see it right there. Or I can also do Alt, or oh, sorry, Dynamesh has to be active. 1 second, there we go. I can do Control and drag off the mesh. That's the hotkey for Dynamesh as well. So those are going to do the same thing. And now look at this. Now it's giving me more subdivisions across this, right? More subdivisions across that, and I can now, if I wanted to, add, like, you know how like a goat's horns are kind of, they have that sort of ripple to them. Like if I wanted to add that on here now, I could sculpt that in, you know? That'd be possible for me now. So that's what Dynamesh is fantastic for: combining objects, and then also um, adding geometry, or giving you resampled even geometry that you can sculpt on. Now, our workflow is to not use that exactly, right? We don't want to just Dynamesh everything. Like, you can get real good results with Dynamesh. I'm not knocking Dynamesh at all, but sometimes it'll cut your geometry across strangely. Like, it won't divide it up nicely. It'll give it a nice even poly count, but sometimes we want our edge flow to kind of follow the shape a little bit more. So I'm going to turn on polyline fill so you can see what this next tool is going to do for us. And it's called Zremesh. Zremesh. So Zremesh has a bunch of options here. If I want to keep these poly groups, I can do keep groups, and then it will smooth them out, and it's pretty nice. So if I click that button, you'll see it's going to process the mesh and smooth it out. And look how it gave us some nice edge loops around there. If you don't want it to keep groups, you can just turn that off. But then you also have these different settings down here. So target polygons count, that's going to be in terms of thousands. So if you want 5,000 approximate points, you're going to leave that there. And then Zremesh, if you want it to go half the amount, so right now I have 21,000 active points. If I want half that, I'll click that. And then double is going to up-res it a little bit. And yeah, and same is going to keep it equal to what it is. I'll just do Zremesh half. And adapt is going to try to focus geometry more in more detailed places. But look at what Zremesher has done for us. It's redirected that edge flow. It's using all quads to describe our forms. It's actually pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible. And you can make it even better by describing some of these with Remesher Guides, which are basically just curves in ZBrush. You can kind of dictate where you want that edge flow to go. Say you wanted it to follow the jawline perfectly, you could just do that around here. If you wanted a nice loop around the lips, you could do that as well. And then you could make curve strength be like a 97, like really high up there, and then Zremesh, boom. Now it's going to give you close to that. See how it's following along the jaw? You get a subdivision there. You have a loop around the horns. It's gonna do its best for that. Now it's not perfect, but it's really nice for sculpting because it gives us geometry in a nice orientation. It gives us nice topology there. So I'm gonna go back to my move brush, and then you can start sculpting on it. So our general workflow is to Dynamesh to get some rough shapes in there, to combine shapes if we need them to. And then we're going to Zremesh once we want to start refining the shape. Once we want to get some better shapes in there, and we're going to start sculpting on it. That's when we hop over to Zremesh. And then you're also probably thinking, like, man, this mesh looks like almost pixelated, right? It's almost like a pixelated sort of look. It's just because I have a low poly count, and you're going to want to keep these shapes real low poly. And if you're wondering what I'm talking about between low and high poly, let's hop over to our divide, our subdivisions over here. So if I click this button, this is all in the geometry panel. Remember, all in the geometry. We've got Dynamesh, Zremesh, and divide. So if I wanted more detail on this, boom, I just click divide, and look at that. It just split that model into twice the amount of spans between each subdivision in there. Really powerful stuff, right? Because I can just keep going, boom. I can keep going. Look at that, subdivision 4. Look how smooth that shape is. But beware, be very careful, my friends, because if I start sculpting on this now, and I start trying to smooth it out, look at how that shape doesn't smooth out. Look at how it doesn't smooth out there. So instead what you want to do is work on your lower subdivision levels for your bigger changes. And then if you're doing like a lot of pores or something, then that's when you hop over to these higher subdivision levels and start messing around with them, you know? That's our general workflow. And you can hop between them, but a lot of Dynamesh and Zremesh are going to not like your subdivisions, so you want to make sure you have all your main forms represented from Dynamesh and Zremesh first before you do any sort of subdivision level type stuff. You can do some conserving of that and stuff, but I want us to keep things nice and simple for when we're starting out. Nice and simple. So that's Dynamesh, Zremesh, divide. Now let's say first I'm going to reduce all my subdivisions down here with the slider, and I'm just going to delete all the higher subdivision levels because I don't want those anymore. So let's get these horns out of here. Let's get them out of here. I'm going to use I'll use trim rectangle. Let's give that a go. So I'm going to zoom out. See, now this is what I'm talking about, about a big form change, right? Like this is a lot. I'm doing Control Shift for that trim dynamic brush. Also, note how it's not symmetrically trimming this model. So let's keep trimming away at this. Boom. And I'm going to mirror it over. Remember, mirror and weld. Let's see, it's in modified topology in geometry. Mirror and weld. Boom. Perfect. And then next step, I want to smooth this out because I just want it to go back to a regular head shape, right? So let's do that. And then you'll notice that I have a bunch of geometry here. It's kind of not even. Let's go in to geometry, Dynamesh. Boom. 64. Or lower. You can always go lower. And then let's Zremesh that. Zremesh half. Oh, there you go. Now we have some nice sculptable geometry. We don't have those weird like artifacts of when we had those horns there. You know how that edge flow is kind of messed up there. Let's get something much nicer with that. Let's turn off polyframe. Hotkey for that is Shift F. And then we can start establishing this head shape. Start making that a little bit more solid. And then once you have that into a good spot, say you wanted to have a hat on this guy. Say you wanted a hat. Now how would we do that, right? Like that's an entirely separate mesh. Like I suppose I could go in here and start adding onto this and then like Dynameshing it, I suppose I could do that. But it would make sense. It would make more sense to have that be a separate object entirely. Like that hat is its own object. Like if I wanted to put an eye in here, that eye is its own object as well. You wouldn't merely just sculpt it on top. So we need to talk about subtools. Subtools are additional objects in your scene. And let's just give this person a hat. So let's go to we're going to be looking at all these sort of things. You can rename any object that you have selected in here. You can duplicate them, delete them. You can merge them together. You can split them if they're separate 3D shapes, like they don't share any of the same vertices, But what we're looking for is append. I'm going to append a. Let's just do a sphere. Boom. And then note it doesn't select that sphere, so we have to select it ourselves. There we go. Let's move this. So let's give them a nice just little hat here. And first things first, I want to kind of get this cut in half. There's a lot of ways we could do that, right? Like I could just mask half of it and then flip that by clicking there and then scaling. Like that's just going to scale directly inward right there. That would work. I could also do that one of those trim brushes. So Control Shift and then select one of your trims. I'll do trim rectangle. And then boom, right there. Either of those are going to work. You could also hide the bottom and then delete the hidden. But we're just going to use this basic tools right here. And let's just move that into place. So it's going to look pretty weird without any sort of polish and without an ear in the right spot. but I'm just showing you what these subtools are able to do. And then say we wanted to move just this brim. We wanted to get that sort of brim shape. First, I'm going to need to reapply symmetry because we appended a new object, right? So press X, and then you're going to get symmetry on there. Let's just mark this shape, right? I'm just going to, sorry, not mark, mask. I'm just masking the front of this hat. Then I'm going to Control-click, reverse that, and I'm just going to move. I'm just going to move that hat, that brim now. See that? Now we got a nice brim popping out of the object. Let's Control. Actually, I'm just going to go back into one of my regular brushes. Let's do Clay Buildup. And then I'm going to Control-click drag off the mesh to undo that selection. Then I'm going to go to Geometry, because all these faces are stretched out, right? I can't sculpt on this. Like, I can only touch these verts over here. So I'm going to need to Dynamesh. So it's Dynamesh. Let's keep it low. Let's do 64. Boom. Perfect. And then let's do Zremesh. Let's do half. Oh, there we go. Now we have some geo in the scene. I'm just gonna smooth out the front of this. Let's turn off our polyframe. I'm gonna damn standard to pinch that seam right there. You could even have the brim be a separate object, right? Or a separate subtool, because they are different shapes right there, right? Like that, there would be a crease between them. And if we want to use Move Topological to give this a little bit more shape right there. Maybe I don't like how far out it goes. I can push this back. But yeah, there we go. And we can Zremesh again. There we go. There we go. Looking pretty nice. And then if you wanted to add some more density to that, you can set up, do some subdivisions on there, and define this seam more. Some other things that you can do with the subtools include. So now I can't. Notice that when I'm sculpting on this, it's not letting me sculpt on this other shape, you know, down here. That can be pretty annoying because you'd have to go into the subtool menu, click this, and start sculpting on it that way. You can also just press Alt and then just tap on the other mesh, and then it will swap to that one, and you'll be selected on it, and you can sculpt on it that way. It's really fast that way. If you wanted these to be one mesh again, you could go to Merge and then Merge Down, boom, and then it says it's not an undoable operation, boom. They're all one mesh, and now notice in your subtool menu that they are on the same tool. If you wanted to split them up, so in case you have not combined their geometry yet, you could go to Split and then do Split to Parts. Or if you have different polyframes here, you could group split, or so if you have different polygroups here, you can tell by the different color. You could do group split, either is going to work. So if I do Split to Parts, boom, right there, and there you go. Now there are two different subtools again. Some additional info is that you can have groups of them. Just for our purposes though, just keep it on this first setting right here. The others are Boolean operations and stuff like that, so we don't worry about that. If you want to preview them as being turned off, then you can always turn this little eye icon off, but for the most part we leave everything else kind of as is. But yeah, you can use all these eyes right there. You can also have them be transparent, and then you can kind of see through and start sculpting on the underside of a mesh. It's kind of easier that way. You can also turn on the ghosting so you can like really see through. It has this like little Fresnel effect on it. which is nice. You can also do dynamic solo, so it's going to only show the one that you have selected if that's your jam. All of those options are yours. All right. But yeah, that's about it, folks. Thanks for watching.